What's something that as a non-American you will never understand? Lol. Homecoming is a dedicated, American, football game intended to invite previous alumni back home to watch a football game. It is usually a game where the home team is expected to win, so it's fun to watch. Many schools hold their class reunions on homecoming weekend. So at the school my hubs was a football coach that they'd have the 10-year, 20-year, 30-year, 40-year, and 50-year class reunions that weekend, and they'd all go to the football game to support the team and to see old classmates. Homecoming as a AHS student involves a dance after the game. There is also usually a court where popular kids get nominated and recognized for their achievements. Niceness. The girls chosen get all dressed up, arms escorted out by their fathers, and one senior girl is crowned homecoming queen. TBH. I find the HS student part of homecoming super weird, but I'm all about a dance and the chance to get all dressed up. Homecoming week is usually fun for the whole community. The alumni get to see old friends, the football team gets a little extra support, the HS kids get a fun new week of dress-up days and a dance that weekend. Oh, and there's usually a parade that involves the football team, the marching band, the homecoming court, and floats from the local community. The traditions will vary from school to school and state to state, but that's the general idea. I've never lived in a whole neighborhood, and honestly I would never want to. I hate the idea of someone threatening to kick me out of the home I bought because my yard wasn't mowed a certain way or a friend parked their car in my driveway. It's usually run by some old-ass dinosaur with a power complex, not to mention they come from racist backgrounds. I don't want to be told what to do by a racist old hag. They began in California in the 50s as a way to keep non-whites from moving into white neighborhoods. Decades-old bylaws prohibiting ownership by blacks are still occasionally discovered in some hoes' rulebooks. Nowadays they are used to keep undesirables, poorers, young people, etc., out and maintain home values by forcing residents to keep up their properties in certain ways. Way too often they devolve into petty dictatorships where you can be kicked out of your own home for not keeping your grass a certain height. Americans have always had a culture of rugged individualism. There's an expectation that an adult should be able to make it on their own. Also, American culture revolves around the nuclear family. When you become an adult you strike out on your own, get married, have kids, and that's your new family unit. You live apart from your parents and are financially and otherwise independent from them. Other cultures don't perceive the family unit this way. Adult children might bring their spouse to live with them in their family home. Money and possessions might be freely shared between parents/kids/aunts/uncles/cousins, etc. It's just a cultural difference. So this started after the Great Depression ended, when the U.S. had a big economical boom. Jobs were everywhere and you could buy a house, a car, and raise a family just making a very average pay. Since then our standards for society have stayed the same, but our economy has gone to shit. So we have 18-year-olds getting kicked out and couch surfing because they're working 3 jobs and still can't afford rent. Taking vacation days is a huge hassle because 1, you get a giant guilt trip, 2, you can't actually plan anything because they wait until last minute to approve your time off request. We had a trip planned to Disneyland and my boss said he'd approve it, so booked everything, and a week before he denied my request because we were too short-staffed. I had to tell him either he fully reimbursed me for our trip, approve the time off, or I quit. But I wasn't losing thousands of dollars. He wrote me up for insubordination and I quit. Went on vacation and had a new job the day after we got back from vacation. I was going to lose 80 hours of paid time off, but I threatened the owner of the company with legal action and they paid it out, all being an American worker. In school in general, really, my high school built an entire complex for our soccer, football, and football teams, American football, but our choir department didn't have enough funding to have one concert. Edit, I keep getting the same responses, so let me clarify, I don't mean weekly performances, I mean we couldn't afford to have a single concert that entire year. Heck, if you've been in a high school choir, you'd know that you can't expect even the advanced ensemble to be ready for a new performance every week. One of the reasons it became a thing is that there was a huge push in the late 1800s and maybe the early 1900s for exercise to be part of the educational experience. I think it was kind of a mind, body, and soul type ethos. This is also right around when American football began to develop into its modern form, in the sense that it was distinguishable from what would become association football and that scoring was standardized. It still looked nothing like the game we know today, and it caught on like wildfire. The late 1800s also saw the invention of basketball and the standardization of baseball, so the three biggest American sports all were gaining in prominence when colleges went into this sports craze. I don't know enough about hockey to know if anything similar was happening there, though both hockey and baseball are very regionalized at the college level compared to football and basketball. I think there's also a lot of parallels to be drawn between college sports and fraternities and sororities. They are both populated by people who are stereotypically in the same social strata. They both provide networking opportunities with current students and alumni, and they both feed into the arms race culture where each school or each chapter is always trying to outdo all of the others as a matter of pride, and people are willing to sink serious money into making that happen. Why do colleges and even high schools sink so much money into sports? Because it makes money, and raises their academic profile, and gives them bragging rights, etc. Why does it make money? Because in a lot of places, it is the closest thing to a professional franchise that the area is going to get. Most people don't root for college teams because that's the college they went to, they root for college teams because that's where someone in their family went, or it's who their parents or relatives root for, or it's who other people they grew up with root for. That's particularly true in the South where there's fewer population centers large enough to support a professional franchise but where there are a bunch of well-funded flagship state universities with lots of money to build nice facilities and field really good football teams. American football got its start from college clubs picking it up. College football was a popular weekend activity before the NFL ever existed. Those traditions have carried over for 100+ years. This is supported by the fact that tons of colleges have their athletic department funded by their football programs alone. It's such a wildly popular sport that it has enabled colleges to begin sports programs in other places as well. I've never had a single thing stolen off my porch. It seems to be regional. You could leave a diamond ring on my front stop with a sign that says "Steal me" and no one would touch it. At worst, my neighbor would notice and pick it up for me. They'd put a note on my door or mailbox that they have it and I'll go over and get it. People just don't steal things in my neighborhood. Yes, the meth dealer kid used to steal stuff but it was just little things. Change out of the ashtray in your car. That sort of thing. Nothing more than that. Keep in mind, my neighborhood is not Ozzie and Harriet. Right down the road is a rub and tug place as well as a meth dealer and a reoccurring meth lab. The lab keeps coming back when they get busted. There are plenty of people stealing stuff but stealing stuff off your porch is just rude. This is Minnesota. We don't do that. We commit proper crimes, not petty theft, with the exception of change in your ashtray. At least in the suburbs, the U.S. is remarkably safe. I've never had a package stolen off my porch. I rarely lock my back door. I'm part of a buy-nothing group in my neighborhood where people offer up things they have that they no longer need or ask for things they need before going to buy them. Because of that, there's currently a waffle iron I don't use anymore sitting on my porch for someone I don't know who needed one to come get whenever she wants. I don't live anywhere special. I'm in the suburbs of a major metro area in Texas. It's just kinda how life is here. There is literally an incredibly popular movie that came out many years ago about a man, who was the hero, who couldn't afford medical treatment for their child, so they took the emergency room hostage. That should tell you everything you should know about our medical system. Signed, the girl who has literally bought her inhalers from Craigslist and Street Junkies because I couldn't afford out-of-pocket expenses and didn't feel like death by no breathe. Those are descriptors of what year they are in HS and college. Most American schools are set up as elementary K through 5, start at 5 years old and are typically 11 by the time you finish 5th grade. Middle school, grades 6-8, ages 11-14, and then HS, grades 9-12, ages 14-18, and then college. 9th grade and first year of college are both called freshmen. 10th grade and second year of college are both called sophomores. 11th grade and third year of college are both called juniors. 12th grade and fourth year and beyond in college are all called seniors. If you knew all that and just didn't know why we do that, I apologize cause I have no answers. I don't know why we do it. The woman who's credited with starting the trend regrets it and says it irks. She held a gender reveal, cut the cake with white icing to see what color the filling is as a reveal, because she and her husband had been trying for children for a while and kept miscarrying. So the celebration was also that time the fetus seemed healthy enough to carry to term and survived long enough to determine the sex. Nobody really likes the current healthcare system, which makes sense because it's an accident of history that's held up by patchwork and duct tape. We just can't agree on what would be better, because there's always trade-offs. Healthcare is a complex thing to mess with, and every time major healthcare reform is attempted, people are more scared of the unknown than they are of the current system. In the past half-century, the biggest swings in House representation in a midterm year have come in 1974, Watergate, 1994, failed bid for healthcare reform, 2010, Obamacare, and 2018, failed bid to repeal Obamacare. It's not a failure to accept we need something different, but it is a failure to commit to anything different. And, of course, between insurers, providers, and pharmaceutical companies there will be at least 3 different major lobbies pushing reform in one direction or another and trying to sway public opinion against any reform that would threaten their profits. Hey, I agree. I once talked to my American husband about traveling the length of the North Island and NZ in like 6-8 hours, and he was like, dude, that's barely across my state. I never really realized just how huge the US is. I had to write something about a road trip and asked him how far it would take from point A to B, and he was like, 2 days. Well shit, haha. Edit. I was incredibly tired when I wrote this. It takes about 13 hours from the top of the North Island to the bottom of the North Island. I was thinking of the time I traveled from about halfway to Wellington. Lol. I know our roads aren't straight. I basically grew up with road trips of NZ every holiday. Haha. I made $3.65 an hour as a waitress. Some nights I'd get $100 in tips, Friday or Saturday night, for 5 hours of work. That's pretty good. Comes out to around $20 an hour. But then if you have to work a Monday lunch or Tuesday lunch, it was so dead and so full of older people using coupons that it would be maybe $15 for 5 hours of work. That's when a lot of cleaning would be done. And then the church crowd was always the worst on Sundays, very impatient, all came in at once. Ordered cheaper food than usual for a group of that size because it was lunchtime and often many kids' meals involved. They barely tipped anything, so we would be exhausted and barely make anything for the work. It's bad for a lot of reasons. First, it puts you in a bad position with the tipping customers. You'd make the largest tips off of single men, especially those who ordered a lot of drinks, tend to spend more and tip more. And you can imagine the situations that sets you up for. It also puts you in a bad position with management because the shifts you work make a huge difference on the amount of money you get, so you put up with a lot of harassment to keep good paying shifts. And lastly, it leads to a lot of discrimination when it comes to the service a person gets when they come in. If you haven't tipped in the past, or look like someone doesn't usually tip, race, age, etc., then you're going to get very poor service. I was on holiday in the US, and while I was ordering a drink at the bar, one of the patrons noticed my accent and said, "Hey, are you Scottish?" I said that I was indeed from Scotland, and he told me he'd love to visit one day. I thought that was the end of the conversation, but after a thoughtful pause he added, "That's on the border with Ireland, right?" I couldn't decide if he was taking the piss, so I just replied that the Irish Sea could be considered the border. Yes, and left him to his beer. That is highly dependent on each family. The USA is very diverse, so customs differ with each household. Heck, My family is English and we don't wear shoes in our house, while some white families are fine with it. Whenever I go to someone's home for the first time, I ask them as I'm entering what they do and just copy them. If they wear shoes inside, I will too. If they don't, I'll leave them out the entryway. Living with parents 1 year older than 18 consider rude. It's actually reverse over here. We live with parent and pay their bill and living cost till their last breath. Edit. I found out that most of the guys don't know how it works, so I'll explain. In most Asian and Middle East countries, this is how one live their life. We pay their living cost because we think that's how we would be able to pay them back. But living goes like this. You stay in parent house. Parent grow you spending their money and stuff. Once you're done with education, you get a job and then help your family while living in the parent house. You get married and still live in the same house. You get separated for some reason from your parent, but following are the top reason. Once you have your own family and the house has no more room for you and your children, you build your own house and get separated, but remember, will still pay their bills. You and your brother get married and then no space for another brother, then the elder one has to move on to new house which he has to build. Your wife and your mom don't go along and see 8ish all the time, so you parent makes you separated from them. P.S. 99% people have their own house in my culture. Nobody rent there, they build their own. And not just tiny one. 50% of people have 3-4 bedroom villa-style house with a big yard in front. TL Doctor, we stayed with parent till their last breath, and pay their bills and living cost. Politics in the U.S. used to be a matter of opinion that was often kept secret from all but the closest friends, but it's shifted into a matter of identity and morality that has been incredibly polarizing. You want to let everyone know that you are either absolutely not one of those baby-killing, terrorist-hugging, business-stifling Democrats, or one of those bigoted racist, woman-hating, theocratic nutjob Republicans. Excellent question. I served in the U.S. Air Force for nearly 10 years. Need to see a doctor? Okay. See a doctor. Need meds? Here you go. Sick? If the doctor says stay home, you stay home. The only time I paid money out of pocket was when my wife had kids. My oldest was born cesarean, and she and my wife were in the hospital 4 days. $48 total. It can be like this for everyone in the U.S., but the pharma and insurance lobbyists spend lots of money making sure it doesn't happen. I'm from the States, and I know a lot of people, family members, who will fight tooth and nail to argue against any sort of betterment of our healthcare system. I have a friend, in favor of free healthcare, who was diabetic and went to the hospital recently because he went into diabetic shock from rationing his insulin. Spent a week in the hospital and was doing pretty bad for a few days there. They gave him vouchers for about 10 free vials. Now he has a huge hospital bill, all because he couldn't afford to properly use the medicine that he needs to live. It's not so much a tolerance, as it is something a lot of people desperately want fixed, but don't have enough power to change. Hopefully that tide shifts soon, but I don't imagine that taking hold for a long time. Skeptical. My father is American and he makes other Americans really uncomfortable with his long and detailed answers to that question, and that's not a feature of his old age. He's always been like that. Dad feels like even other well-educated and well-traveled Americans don't really want genuine and deep conversations. Maybe it's a generational issue. Maybe it's because he isn't mobile anymore, can't afford to move, and it's just the older people in his area. I've had lots of engaging discussions online with younger Americans. Please come and visit us without meaning it is something my Danish mother noticed. This is especially infuriating with regards to a COVID. They'll make claims like the CDC is lying. Okay. Well, what about the governments of the other 190-plus countries? Even if the U.S. could get some other countries in cahoots, you don't think that rival countries would want to call it out? Like if we got India on board, wouldn't Pakistan love the opportunity to show that it was all a con? But most Americans view the pandemic as a uniquely American thing and can't shake that loose.